Hello, everyone. My name is Grace. I am the mediator for this debate. In today's topic, we will be hearing two sides on why or why not we should defund the police. Here with me, I have Sam and Rin. Sam, will you please state your age, what state you are from, and what your stance on the argument is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Sam. I'm 15 years old, and I live in California. Somehow I became a conservative in California. I don't get it either. My basic position on defunding the police is that it won't solve the issue because defunding a system is now not the way to improve it. Defunding the system is counterintuitive and goes against the very things that we're trying to achieve if we want to improve the police system. I believe that defunding the police is a terrible idea that's not backed by any statistical or historical evidence, and I'm very opposed to it.
Alrighty, awesome. And with me now, I have Rin. Will you please state your age, what state you are from, and what your stance on the argument is?
Hi, I'm Rin. I'm 16. I'm from Illinois, and I'm advocating for the need to defund the police. I believe that by doing this, we can show officers cannot get away with the police brutality at the levels they are, and we can focus on reallocating the money into mental health funds and anti-violence organizations.
Alrighty, awesome. This is a freestyle debate, so no questions will be asked from me unless the conversation comes to a sudden pause. I am here to make sure the debate goes well. The debate will run for 60 minutes, and I will pop in when the timer is done. And with that, I will let Sam go first on why the police should not be defunded. You have the floor.
Sure. So, start by saying that if you look at any system that you're trying to improve, the first thing you do is you find the improvements that need to be made. You don't take away the funding because funding is what allows a system to improve itself. So, if I want to make the school system better, then the first step would be to figure out what improvements we need. And let's say we figure out, okay, there needs to be better curriculum. There needs to be more competent teachers. There needs to be all these things. Then you'd allocate the funding to make sure that the school system, is equipped to achieve all of these things. However, for some reason, we're using completely counterintuitive logic with the police. Somehow the idea is that if we take funding from the police, they'll still be able to improve themselves. That's not a rational argument that's backed by any evidence, so I just don't understand how that would be an effective way to improve the system.
So I absolutely understand your perspective on that. However, even before all this stuff with like George Floyd and all the things that have been coming out recently, a lot of people have been advocating for police reform for years, and that hasn't gone anywhere. Saying defund the police is how we're like being this controversial, being this loud about it, how we're going to make this change. And if we say defund the police, oh, we're really reallocating the money to put it into better places, because right now the government, $500 million goes into funding the police from the government. And I feel like if we can reallocate that money and place it into anti-violence organizations and mental health funds, which are very necessary because a lot of violence comes from mental health issues, we can fix that. By saying police reform, not getting a lot of spark. We're not having a lot of people having these conversations. But when we say defund the police, there are people having these conversations.
Well, that's not really accurate. People have been talking about police reform for a long time, and to deny that the police have come a long way throughout American history would be false. So, police reform is something that's been being pursued. Now, you are correct. When the left goes to an extreme point, it gets more attention. However, that is not necessarily a good thing to do. I could go around and say I'm a KKK member, and I'm sure that would get me a lot of attention. But going to these extremes, even if they are able to get more attention, is clearly not what you should be doing. What you should be doing is you should be proposing rational arguments that actually have evidence to back them, which is something that defunding the police did not. Historically, when we've tried to take funding from the police in countries like America, but really around the world, we've seen similar trends in the UK, it hasn't worked. In fact, it's led to spikes in crime. And this is exactly what you'd expect. Taking funding from a system causes so many problems, and especially when you look at the police system, we can get into some of the details, but defunding it will not achieve what you want it to achieve. I feel very confident about that. What will achieve, what I think all of us want to achieve, is an end to the fact that, not every single cop is a good person. Now, most are good people who genuinely want to protect and serve the communities that they serve, but sure, not every police officer is a good person, and yes, there have been some truly horrible things that have been done by police. An example is what happened with George Floyd. We all want to end it, but the way you end it is by not taking away funding. That will achieve the opposite. And if you want to get into some of the details about that, I'd be happy to.
So again, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and it's logical what you're saying, but there has been reform happening. These changes are not happening fast enough, and there are more and more innocent lives being taken by police almost every day. And this reform that's going on is not happening fast enough for the amount of lives being taken. We need a drastic change to change what's going on in the system, because what we've been doing so far has not been working.
Yeah, so there's a couple of problems with that. First, the police don't take that many innocent lives. The numbers are heavily over-exaggerated. I mean, if you look at the actual data, for starters, let's just look at unarmed shootings. Police shoot about 9 unarmed people a year, I believe, which is, it might be slightly higher, but even in those cases, there is often context. So the idea that the police are frequently killing people for no reason is inaccurate. Now, on the other hand, if you want to improve the police system, which obviously we're trying to do, saying we need to go to a radical change isn't necessarily the best idea. Just going to some other opposite extreme without evidence that it'll work is a bad idea. And the evidence is very, very clear that defunding the police won't work. So, for example, if you look at England, in 1996 they banned handguns, which led to a spike in crime. Now, I don't know if you'd agree with that there, because I'm guessing you're in favor of gun control, but that is often something. Oh, you are pro-2A. Awesome. Okay. Yeah, I know a lot of people who are very far left support it. So that's something we can agree on, and I'm glad to hear that. In 1996, the UK banned handguns, and it led to a 50% increase in crime over the next 8 years. So in around 2003, I believe, they began to fund the police a lot more. There was a massive increase in police, and this brought the crime rates back down. 2010, they defunded the police, and now crime rates are spiking back up. So it's pretty clear if you look anywhere, at any point in history, defunding the police has led to a spike in crime, and funding the police has led to a decrease in crime.
So I just wanted to say about the police not killing that many people. According to mapping.org, there were only 27 days in 2019 that the police did not kill someone. Whether that be an innocent person or not, those are lives being taken.
Well, sure, but obviously there are situations where a police officer shooting somebody is the result that we want. I mean, people dying is always a bad thing, but the idea that every single shooting by a police officer shouldn't have happened is false. So, for example, if there's an armed person running around and they're a threat to people, then it would make sense to shoot them. If you look at the vast majority of police shootings, they are justified. And to pretend that we should defund police because they're killing people, which in... Excuse me, it's early and I haven't talked much, so my voice is kind of off.
Okay.
Again, if you look at just the statistical data about who the police are shooting and you look at the context for why they were shot, in almost every single case, it's justified.
Okay, another thing that I kind of wanted to bring up when it comes to this is that, people of color, specifically black people, are a lot more likely to be targeted by police, which is another thing that needs to change. Though
Well, that's because they're more likely to commit crime.
Oh, not in instances where these black people are being killed. It doesn't necessarily matter if a white person and a black person are committing the same crime. A black person is 3 times more likely to be killed by police, according to statistics. Which
right,
are also
but that doesn't compare for all facts. So a better study called an empirical analysis of police differences in racial use of force, which was conducted by Harvard University and also published at Yale, looked at comparing for all factors and found that there's no disparity at all between white and black shootings. And another study in 2012 showed that police are actually slightly more likely to shoot whites than blacks. So if you aren't comparing for all factors, then yeah, you'll find those results. But when you start comparing for the factors, you find police are not more likely to shoot black people.
Well, there's a difference between the amount of white and black people being shot by police and the percentages, and black people are disproportionately shot by police. While the numbers might be similar between the amounts of white and black people being shot, it's disproportionately the percentages of black people.
Well, yes, but again, the black people disproportionately commit crimes, and they disproportionately commit violent crimes. So you would expect that police would be more likely to be in an encounter with a black person. But if you compare for all factors, including the crime, including whether or not they were armed, if you take all these contextual factors into account, then you'll find that police are not more likely to shoot blacks than whites. It's just, this is a lie that Black Lives Matter is very effectively spread through propaganda, but the statistical evidence is very clear that police are not more likely to shoot black people.
I feel like you see these innocent lives being taken more. Like if you just turn on the news, you're going to see all these innocent black lives that the police, they're unarmed or they're falsely accused for a crime, and their lives are being taken. They're being, like with George Floyd when they suffocated him, or with Breonna Taylor when they shot her while she was asleep. Like, these are innocent people, and police brutality is very real.
Well, yeah, of course, but I think what you're missing there is that the news is very left-leaning, and they're trying to further an agenda of police being racist, so they're not going to talk about the cases where police are unjustifiably doing things to white people. So a good example of this was in 2016, a man named Tony Timpa was killed by police through pretty similar methods to George Floyd. They had their knees on him, not on his neck, but above his lung, and it ended up killing him, and it was very clearly a problem with the police should not have done what they did, and it was pretty clearly police brutality. And I'm sure you've never heard his name. Most people have never heard his name because the media doesn't show you those types of cases. So I would understand how you'd think, just from turning on the news, as using your own words, that police are not more likely to shoot, or that police are more likely to shoot black people, and that it's only black people who are getting killed unjustifiably. But again, the evidence about this just is not clear, and turning on the news and seeing if it's black or white people is a misleading way to see who the police are shooting.
Well, that just further shows that police are killing people unjustifiably. Like, even if that person was white, like you were just saying, that's proving that there are people being unjustifiably killed by police.
I've never denied that. Police, a small number, not every single police officer is a good person. The vast majority are, but there is a very small number of police officers who are bad. And there's a very small number of police officers who do shoot in a case where they shouldn't have shot. I would never deny that. There's 800,000 police officers in America. I'm not saying that every single one is a good person, but where do we go from that? Why would we defund the police and assume that that'll solve any issues? If you look at a system the police system overall saves a lot of lives, but I agree. I would love to make sure that these unjustified shootings stop happening. So what's the solution to that? Again, this debate is about defunding the police. Why do you think, despite all the historical and statistical evidence that goes against it, that defunding the police would achieve the goals that you want?
Because I believe that reform hasn't worked so far, and we need to take drastic measures to change fast, because like there are a lot of innocent people being killed, whether that be black, white, or whatever, and we need to take drastic measures to change that, and just reforming it has not been working.
Well, again, you can't just say that you don't feel like this has been working, so let's just radically and drastically change everything with no evidence that the radical and drastic changes will work, because it's very likely that those changes, again, looking at all historical and statistical evidence about defunding the police, that it'll achieve the opposite of the goal that you're trying to achieve. Taking funding from a system won't work. What it will achieve, and look, let's look at another example. So during the 2008 recession, police officers were defunded as the economy couldn't really afford to give them more funding. The officers were understaffed, they were underpaid, they were overworked, and what ended up happening was that there was almost a doubling in complaints about unnecessary use of force, because when you're understaffed and underpaid and overworked, things like that happen more. So if you're trying to get rid of use of force in cases where it's unjustified, then defunding the police statistically achieves the opposite.
If we have control over where the money is going to that we're taking from these police, we can put it into places that help. Like, I've been reading a lot about the places they want to put into, like, mental health, like funding, like I said previously, which is a huge reason for these violent crimes that are being committed. If we can fix it from the inside out, there would be a lot less police brutality due to being, like, confused about the wrong person, because it would not be all this stuff coming about actually violent people. Of course, it would not automatically make all people less violent, but if we can put all this money into getting better mental health, getting better resources for these people that cannot have resources, because poverty is also another reason for high crime. If we can get these people the resources they need, then there will be less crime, and because of that, there will be less police brutality.
to assume that criminals are committing crimes because of their mental health is not accurate. There's no evidence that this is why violent crimes are committed. The main reason that violent crimes are committed is because people want a certain thing. So rape is committed because of desire for power and for mainly, actually, yeah, if you look at there's been a lot of really interesting psychology research on it, but it's mainly a desire for power. And then monetary crimes like robbing the bank, for example, is committed because people see a lot of money and they feel that they want it. But to say that this is because they're all mentally ill is a huge generalization of criminals that doesn't have any evidence to support it. And the idea that funding mental health more will lead to a decrease in crime proportional to the amount that we would be defunding the police is inaccurate. And again, this has been tried. It's been tried in the UK. We had a bit of an experiment with it during the 2008 recession. It just doesn't work. Defunding the police does not work. There's no evidence it works. The evidence is very clear that it doesn't work. If you just look at the history, you will see it doesn't work. And it makes sense. Defunding systems is not how you improve them.
What would your solution be to the rising police brutality?
The first thing I do is end something called qualified immunity. Do you know what that is?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'd get rid of that. That would be a great first step. And then I'd also be interested in looking into whether or not chokeholds have an actual use. I've heard compelling evidence from both sides, but I definitely want to look into that more and essentially just try to reform the police to some extent by making some reasonable policy changes. I think we also have to acknowledge that the vast majority of police are good people who want to protect and serve their communities, and that we have a system that saves a lot of lives overall, and that our police need to be honored and respected.
The thing is, all you're saying, those are all good things, but we've been trying those things. Like, we've been making it, like, for example, mandatory for cops to be wearing body cams, stuff like that. Like, we've been trying to fix it, and these terrible things are still happening.
Well, mandatory body cam laws at all times are silly laws that should never be used. But that's a separate conversation. We haven't tried getting rid of qualified immunity. We haven't tried the things that would actually work. Instead, and frankly, the things that we have been trying have, to a large extent, they have worked. I mean, if you look at how many people, what happens in these communities, how many people are dying, the death rates are going way down because we've gotten a police system that's able to end a crime, which is where the vast majority of black people are dying from murder. I mean, it's very easy to wag fingers at the police, but if you look at who's actually murdering black people, it's almost always other black people during crimes.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. I know that's what a lot of people like to push forward, that narrative that black on black crime is the majority of what's happening, but that's actually not the case at all. It is mostly the police going in, and then they put it on, oh, they were being violent, oh, they were doing this and they were doing that, but it's not as frequent as it seems to be that these are the violent crimes in the poverty neighborhood or between black people.
Well, that's not true, because black people are 13% of the population and responsible for 50% of the murder, and of that 50% of the murder, I think it's about 90% are shooting other black people. So it's absolutely true that black people generally shoot other black people, and because they're disproportionately shooting people, it's mainly innocent black people who are suffering from black on black crime. And to deny black on black crime is to deny a statistical fact while trying to push a narrative and hurting communities. Because if we deny that this crime is happening, then we can't address it, but it absolutely is happening. And the police are the solution to this.
I just don't understand how, we're going to, get this done, because we've been trying reform, and it hasn't been working, or it's been working very slowly. And like I said, I know I'm repeating myself, but we need something drastic because it hasn't been working. Saying defund the police, saying all these things, this is bringing attention. It needs to be brought attention. The news is covering, everyone's talking about defund the police. This hasn't been, oh, police reform. That doesn't make headlines. It doesn't say this and that. Defund the police does.
Well, yes, but as I've said, you can't advocate for something simply to try to get headlines if it's a stupid thing to advocate for. I mean, like I said, I could say that I'm a fascist and try to get lots of attention through that, and I'm sure that I could get myself a fair amount of media attention and get headlines if there was suddenly a huge fascism movement in America. But just because it's a drastic change and just because it would get tons of headlines doesn't mean that we should be advocating for fascism, right? That logic doesn't work with any other thing. It's just a way for people to make an excuse when they realize that the policy that they're advocating for wouldn't actually work and it would be counterproductive.
This all trills down though to like, even with defunding the police, we're showing we cannot give the police the amount of power that they have. A lot of police, they're power hungry. They're the ones who break the law sometimes. Like, you'll see police speeding, you'll see police doing the stuff they advocate against, and by being part of this movement, by being part of ACAB or being part of Defund the Police, showing we're not going to give them this power that they have. They have this power, and they're using it.
Well, good for you.
Bad.
You can
Not
show
all
them.
of them.
I mean, saying, let's show the police sounds fun, but if you're advocating for a horrible policy that doesn't work, I mean, because I've noticed you keep making the point that this gets attention without actually providing any evidence that it'll work. And I think that's concerning. Your priority should be a working policy, not trying to inflame people and get attention.
But that's the first step to making change, is getting this media attention. Then we can make change, because we need to have this attention to be able to start the change.
Well, I mean, we're going in circles here. Make the change, but you can't make the change by advocating for horrible policies. I mean, do you agree that... Are you basically saying that you agree that defund the police is a terrible idea and you're just saying it to try to get on the news?
Oh, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that...
Then let's debate the actual concept of defunding the police if you believe that it's a good idea, instead of talking about how it's getting media attention. Because I think you're trying to have it both ways.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that we need to have the defund the police movement first to get the media attention. Then we could drill down into, because I think a common misconception is that defund the police leads to abolishing the police, which is not the case. It leads to reallocating the money. We're not going to be giving them the $500 million government money that we give them every year, and I think that's way too much money to be giving them. And we could put that money. What? Right?
I mean, do you want more training for the police?
I mean, it hasn't been working. That's the problem.
Really? Okay, so you want them to be... Because if we're defunding the police, let's talk about what will actually happen. We're talking about less training. We're talking about police who are, just like in 2008, understaffed, underpaid, and overworked, which in that case led to actually a doubling in complaints of use of force. So you're talking about a policy that will probably lead to more use of force, not less. If you just look at what's happened when police have been defunded in the past, you're talking about a policy that has so many negative aspects to it. I just don't understand how somebody could advocate for it while understanding the statistical reality is against it. I mean, if you're trying to get rid of police use of force, defunding the police will do the opposite. It leads to more use of force, not less.
I don't really know how to refute that part further. I'm sorry. I just can't put it into like a perspective where I can explain further, because like I already said that we need to have this drastic change. We need to have media attention on this, and that's a first step as to changing. But
if you're saying that you don't know how to refute it, then I mean, we're kind of, if you can't refute an argument, then that generally means that you would agree with the other side, because in a debate, if two people are talking and one makes a point that the other doesn't know how to address, then generally the response is, oh, I didn't think of it that way, and then you change your mind. So would you be, if you don't know how to refute it, does that mean that you're agreeing that defunding the police probably wouldn't be the best way to achieve a decrease in force?
I was getting to that point. Yeah, I was going to say I still believe that it's a solution, but from what you're saying, it might not be the best solution. I still am for defunding the police, but I do understand your side better. I see your perspective as to why it might not be the best idea. I still do support it, but maybe not as fast or as drastic right away. Like, I still think that we need to reallocate the money. I still think we need to give less government funding to the police, but maybe it could happen slower, because like you're saying, it didn't work in 2008 or whatever, but it still needs to happen, because we give the police too much tax money that could be going to things that...
So let's be specific. What exact police program or thing are we funding that we should cease funding? Because if you're saying we're funding them too much, I'm assuming you have something specific in mind that you believe we're funding that we shouldn't be.
Just the police system in general, which our tax money and the government money is going to, the police system.
Right, but what... I mean, what do you want to defund from the police? Like, what do you want police to stop spending money on? Because if you want to take money from them, I think it's important to have an idea of where we're taking the money from.
I didn't necessarily look into the details on that. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, again, I mean, there's a couple of places we can look at, but basically, it sounds to me like you're advocating for defunding the police without an idea of what we should defund, which is problematic because if we don't know what we're defunding, then we're just basically telling police, here you go, this is your new funding, figure it out. Now, the main places that's going to come from are probably salaries of younger, newer police, because they're not going to want to fire police who've been with them a long time who are more senior. And generally, these are more diverse police. So this would, for starters, be getting rid of the diversity in the police force. It would also be leading to, as we discussed, an increase in the use of force by police, most likely. It would lead to understaffed, underpaid, and overworked police. And it would also lead to police being less competent to handle situations because they're a smaller department. So we're basically making police less competent. We're making them use more force. And we're also pushing them to have to resort to more ticketing so that they can raise money to try to go against this. And we're talking about getting rid of new police who bring needed diversity to the departments, as I'm sure you want. So defunding the police just is a horrible way to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Now, it would be a completely reasonable position to say the police are doing these things that I don't like, and so we need to make changes X, Y, and Z to try to improve the system. Say we need to get rid of qualified immunity, or we need to get rid of these other policy things that you don't support. However, saying in general that we should just take funding from the police without an idea of where we're taking the funding from, and with all the historical and statistical evidence going against it, seems like a misguided attempt at trying to defund a system without knowing how to do it or having any idea of how it would work. So with all that in mind, would you agree that defunding the police probably is not the best way to achieve the goals that we want to achieve?
No, yeah, I see what you're saying. That actually makes more sense, and I don't know I'm entirely in support of defunding the police anymore. You really put that into a perspective for me that I could understand.
Well, thank you. This is one of the first debates where we've actually been able to make some progress and change minds, so that's great. I mean, I guess if we agree that defunding the police is no longer the best way to solve these problems, then, I mean, that kind of ends the defund the police debate, unless there's something specific you want to talk about.
I'm not really sure. I think I got most of the points that I could say already.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Well then, I guess we'll end it. But yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Hey everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you want to check out what Conservative Youth Group has to offer, our social medias are linked down below. Everyone, have a great day.